On behalf of the Colorado Department of Revenue, welcome to this video on Form DR 1094 Colorado W-2 Wage Withholding Tax Return Requirements, how to file and pay wage withholding taxes on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly filing frequency, and how to correct under or overpayments that occur in the same current calendar year. Let's jump right in. We'll start by reviewing the Colorado W-2 Wage Withholding Tax Return, Form DR 1094, and filing requirements. Withholding must be calculated for each business entity. Each business entity must operate under a single CAN, or Colorado account number. A Colorado withholding tax return and payment posted to the entity's CAN must include all calculated Colorado wage withholding for the business entity, the wages for all employees at all locations working for the business entity, and all wages paid for all the business's pay periods within the Colorado withholding filing frequency. Separate returns are not filed per employee. Each return and payment must include all Colorado wage withholding for wages paid during the filing period, even if the employee's work to earn the wages was not performed during the filing period. Monthly and quarterly filers must file a tax return, even if no tax is due. Otherwise, the department may estimate the amount of tax due and send the employer a notice of deficiency. An employer can report zero tax by filing a paper DR 1094 return by mail, filing a return through Revenue Online, or making a $0 ACH credit payment through the employer's bank. Please note that $0 direct debit payments cannot be made through Revenue Online. Instead, monthly and quarterly filers can use one of these other methods to file a $0 tax return when necessary. When it comes to remitting withholding taxes, there are two very important things to remember. One, the return and payment method used should be the same to prevent processing delays and errors. Two, when it comes to Colorado withholding taxes, how you pay determines how you file. There are four primary methods to file and pay withholding taxes. The first two payment methods require an employer to both file the DR 1094 withholding tax return and make a payment. If you pay with a check or money order, you must also file the withholding tax return with your payment. If you pay with a credit card, debit card, e-check, or cryptocurrency, you must also file an electronic DR 1094 tax return through your Revenue Online login. If making a DR 1094 tax return payment using a direct debit payment greater than $0 through Revenue Online or an ACH credit payment through your bank, you do not need to file a separate DR 1094 tax return. This is because using either of these payment methods to make a return payment type satisfies the filing requirement. More on this is coming up soon. Employers not required to remit return payments using an EFT method have the option of paying by check or money order instead. The payment must be mailed with a completed DR 1094 W-2 wage withholding tax return. Failure to complete all required fields of the return may result in processing errors. So please be sure to verify the return is complete and accurate. The return and payment must be postmarked on or before the due date to be considered on time. If the postmark date is past the due date, you may incur late penalties and interest. The electronic and paper versions of Form DR 1094 are identical in their line numbers and use for reporting. Please stay with us for a demonstration at the end of the section on how to file the DR 1094. Third-party transaction fees apply to credit card, e-check, and cryptocurrency payments made through Revenue Online. If you choose one of these payment options, we highly recommend also filing the return on Revenue Online to prevent processing errors. Now, remember how I said how you pay determines how you file? Well, if you pay wage withholding using the Revenue Online direct debit payment option for payments greater than $0, or the ACH credit payment option through your bank, you don't need to file the DR 1094 tax return. This is because these payment methods, also called electronic funds transfers or EFT payments, satisfy the filing requirement when return is selected as the payment type. In other words, when you make an EFT return payment, You are reporting the wage withholding liability and making the tax payment, all in one step. If you make a return payment using either of these payment options, please do not file a separate tax return. Doing both will cause you to be charged twice for the same filing period, and we see this happen often. This is why with wage withholding tax, the way you pay is directly related to how you file your return. All employers with annual wage withholding liabilities of $50,000 or more are required to pay by EFT. One of the major benefits of paying by EFT is there are no transaction fees. This is why businesses that are not required to pay by EFT often still choose to use it. To apply ACH credit payments to the correct tax type and situation, please reference Form DR 5785 for important payment codes. Payment codes related to W-2 wage withholding include 01130 to make a wage withholding bill payment towards penalty and interest on a late filed return or payment. 011 to make a wage withholding return payment, which satisfies the DR 1094 withholding tax return filing requirement, and 01102 to make a wage withholding annual reconciliation payment. A reconciliation payment is only used if withholding for the entire calendar year was underpaid. For more information, please reference Form DR 5785. Form DR 5782 has additional information on payment types and requirements. We've talked about Form DR 1094 requirements and methods to file and pay. Now, let's see how it all works, shall we?
The dates and values used for this walkthrough are for illustration purposes only, and rates are subject to change over time. To file a DR 1094, navigate to Tax.Colorado.gov and select Online Services from the top blue menu bar. From the Revenue Online menu tile, select Visit ROL, and you will be directed to the Revenue Online homepage. Enter your username. Enter your password. Select Login. If you are asked for an authentication code, please follow the prompts to have the code sent to you. In this first example, the employer is filing a second quarter DR 1094 tax return by submitting a direct debit return payment. Remember, a direct debit return payment satisfies the filing. From the Wage Withholding Account menu, select Make a Payment. Enter the bank routing number. Enter the bank account number. Then re-enter the bank account number to confirm it. Select the bank account type. To save the bank account information for future use, you can select Yes. Next, you'll need to select the payment type. Let's pause here to look at payment type options, because this is very important. A bill payment is used to pay past due balances and any penalties or interest on late filed returns and payments. A reconciliation payment is used only when reconciling any underpayments discovered for the entire calendar tax year that are reported on the DR 1093 Annual Withholding Tax Reconciliation Return. A return payment is used to pay the withholding liability only, and when paid with a direct debit through Revenue Online, satisfies the DR 1094 filing requirement. Let's see how this works. I'll select Return Payment for the payment type. Next, select the filing period from the drop-down menu. The period displays the last day in the filing period. For this example, we'll be filing a tax return for the second quarter, which ends on June 30th, so that's what I'll select. The payment date defaults to the current date. If you wish to schedule a payment for the future, select the calendar icon to update the payment date. The due date for quarterly filers is the last day of the month that follows the end of the calendar quarter. So, for this example, I'll schedule my payment to process on July 31st, the due date for the second quarter, ending June 30th. Please note that it can take anywhere from 3 to 7 business days from the payment date for the payment to post to your account, depending on the type of payment. Revenue Online will continue to show a balance due and will automatically generate late penalties and interest until the payment is processed. But don't worry. So long as the tax is paid on or before the due date, Revenue Online will automatically reverse any penalties or interest assessed once the payment has posted. Continuing on, I'll enter the amount of withholding taxes due. Confirm the amount being paid in the next field. If you have a debit block with your bank, you will need to provide your bank with the Colorado Department of Revenue blocker ID number that's associated with the type of payment you are making. So please make sure to read payment instructions carefully. For direct debit payments made through Revenue Online, the blocker ID number is D846000537. Select Submit and a pop-up menu will appear. Enter your Revenue Online password, which serves as your signature and authorizes your payment. Select OK to continue. Please make note of the confirmation number for your records. You may also print the confirmation page by selecting Printable View. Select OK to return to your home page. If you made a mistake and need to cancel the payment, we've got you covered. A direct debit payment can be canceled if it is canceled the same day. All other payment methods can only be canceled through the employer's bank and not through Revenue Online. For the second example, the employer decided they would rather pay by credit card and need to cancel the direct debit payment they just initiated. From the Revenue Online homepage, select More. Select Search Submissions. Select the link to the return payment you just made. In the upper right-hand corner, select Cancel Payment. Two pop-up menus will appear. Select Yes to cancel the payment, then OK. The payment will now show as voided. Select the department's logo at the top of the screen to return to the Revenue Online homepage. The top menu box for each tax type will be the most current tax return due. If the current tax return does not appear in the top menu box, go to the Account menu tile. Select File Amend and View Returns Payments. In this example, we'll find the June 30th, 2025 first quarter withholding tax return and select File Now. Line 1 is the total Colorado withholding for all employee wages paid during the filing period. For this example, I'll enter $1,200. Line 2 should only be used if the Colorado withholding for a prior period within the same calendar year has been both overstated and overpaid, and there is a zero balance on the account. How to correctly use Line 2 to account for prior period overpayments in the same calendar year will be discussed in more detail after this walkthrough. Line 2 cannot exceed Line 1. Let me repeat this one more time, as it is extremely important for you to know. Line 2 cannot exceed Line 1. If there is a credit balance on your withholding account, please do not use Line 2. Contact Taxpayer Services if there is a credit balance on your withholding account, as this can be caused by various reasons and requires more research to resolve. Line 3 is the subtotal of Lines 1 and 2 and is automatically calculated by Revenue Online. On Lines 4 and 5, penalties and interest may be self-assessed if a return is not filed timely, but this is not required. If penalties and interest are not self-assessed, and the return or payment is late, the Department of Revenue will calculate the penalty and interest for you and mail a billing statement. More information is available in the Penalties and Interest Tax Topics Guidance publication, which can be found on our website at Tax.Colorado.gov/current-guidance-publications. On Line 6, Revenue Online will automatically calculate the total withholding tax liability due. Select Submit to continue. Enter your password, then select OK. On the bottom right of the confirmation page, select Make a Payment. To make a credit card payment, scroll down and select Other Payment Methods. From the next screen, there will be a list of payment options and instructions, including any information about third-party transaction processing fees. In this example, I'll select Debit or Credit Card. Revenue Online will automatically default to the business name, so no further information should be added here. Select Next to proceed. Verify the account ID type, filing period, balance you intend to pay, and payment type are accurate, then select Next. Select Pay Online to be redirected to the secure payment portal. Select a payment method, then follow the prompts to submit and confirm your payment. Please retain the payment confirmation number for your records. Remember, if you see a balance due or penalties and interest assessed, but initiated your payment on or before the due date, there is no need for concern, as it typically takes about 3 to 7 business days for your payment to post. It's been a pleasure walking you through how to file and pay your withholding taxes using Revenue Online.
That was a great walkthrough. But what happens if we accidentally report or pay an incorrect amount? After all, we all make mistakes, right? If there's an error when filing the DR 1094, it can be corrected in the next filing period, so long as it's corrected within the same current calendar year. This is why there is no amended version of the DR 1094. I am going to repeat this one more time as it is very important. There is no amended version of the DR 1094. Instead, Colorado wage withholding discrepancies are resolved in subsequent filing periods within the same calendar year or when reconciling for the entire calendar year. How to correct the error depends on whether the withholding tax was understated and underpaid, or overstated and overpaid. Return payments made to the same filing period are summed together. So, if withholding taxes were underpaid, a supplemental return payment for the difference can be made to that same filing period. For instance, let's say an employer made a return payment of $1,200 in the first quarter, but later realized it should have been $1,500. In this case, the employer can make a supplemental return payment of $300 to the same first quarter filing period. The sum of the two payments will then equal the correct withholding of $1,500 for the first quarter. Supplemental return payments must be made on or before the due date to avoid late penalties and interest. Also, like payments, withholding amounts reported on each DR 1094 tax return filed to the same filing period are cumulative. So, when sending a supplemental payment that requires a DR 1094 tax return, the return must report the same amount as the payment. In this example, the original tax return reported $1,200 in withholding tax, with a payment of $1,200. So, the supplemental return would report the additional $300 in withholding tax, with a payment of $300. If withholding was overpaid, the overpayment can be claimed in later filing periods under two conditions. 1. The overpayment and correction occur in the same current calendar year, and 2. No credit exists on the withholding account. Continuing our previous example, the employer paid $1,200 to the first quarter but later determined the actual income taxes withheld totaled $1,500. In this situation, though, instead of paying an extra $300 to make up the difference, the employer accidentally made another payment, but this time for the full quarterly amount of $1,500. This means the total withholding reported and paid to the first quarter was $2,700, resulting in a $1,200 overpayment. Let's see how to claim this in subsequent filing periods. On the DR 1094 tax return, Line 1 is the total Colorado taxes withheld for the filing period. Line 2 can be used to account for prior period overpayments in the same current calendar year. Line 2 cannot exceed Line 1. In other words, a claim for an overpayment to a previous filing period cannot exceed Colorado taxes withheld for all subsequent filing periods. For example, let's say the employer's total withholding liability for the second quarter is $1,000. Of the total $1,200 overpayment to the first quarter, the employer can only claim $1,000 in the second quarter on Line 2 because Line 2 cannot exceed Line 1. This reduces the payment in the second quarter to $0. In the third quarter, The total withholding liability is $1,300, so the employer can claim the remaining $200 overpayment made to the first quarter, reducing the payment in the third quarter to $1,100. Let's pause here because this is very important. You are responsible for keeping track of credits claimed on line 2 for any current year overpayments. One common error we see is credits overclaimed on this line item, resulting in a false credit on the account. Often, false credits are not discovered in time to avoid late penalties and interest. This is why line 2 should never exceed line 1. Also, line 2 cannot be used to claim an overpayment from a prior calendar tax year. This means there cannot be an amount on line 2 during the first filing period for any calendar year. Back to our example, fourth quarter Colorado income taxes withheld on line 1 of the DR 1094 were $1,600. Line 2 should be 0. This is because the first quarter overpayment of $1,200 was completely claimed in the second and third quarters. In our example, W-2 Colorado income taxes withheld were $1,500 the first quarter, $1,000 the second, $1,300 the third, and $1,600 the fourth, for a total of $5,400. Ideally, the payments would have matched the actual taxes withheld each quarter. But because of the first quarter overpayment, the employer had to make some adjustments. Even so, the payments of $2,700 to the first quarter, $0 to the second, $1,100 to the third, and $1,600 to the fourth still totals $5,400. While we've covered a few methods to account for over- and underpayments using Form DR 1094, we cannot address every possible situation. To resolve withholding account discrepancies, contact Taxpayer Services as soon as possible. For a list of options to contact our Taxpayer Services Division, please visit our website at Tax.Colorado.gov/contact-us. For training on other withholding topics, including withholding requirements, filing frequencies, how to apply for a license, withholding certificates, how to calculate withholding, or how to reconcile and submit W-2s at year-end, please visit our website at Tax.Colorado.gov/withholding-training. On behalf of the Colorado Department of Revenue Taxation Division, Education and Training, thank you for watching this video on Form DR 1094 Colorado W-2 Wage Withholding Tax Return Requirements, how to file and pay wage withholding, and how to correct under or overpayments in the same current calendar year.